Hey, how's it going? My name's Nat. Coming up on the show. What's going on in Afghanistan? Naomi Osaka sending help to Haiti. And we meet the kid who's walking across England to fight climate change. But before we get started, why don't you hit subscribe if you haven't already? You might have heard a bit about what's happening in Afghanistan. A group there called the Taliban is trying to take control of the country just as US troops are leaving it. Liv explains what's going on.
These are the scenes at Kabul airport as people rush to leave Afghanistan, many of them afraid of what might happen next. Taliban fighters have seized the presidential palace and taken control of nearly all of the country in just over a week.
Devastated. Absolutely devastated about it. It's a terrible situation.
The fighting here goes back decades. The US invaded the country back in 2001, believing those responsible for the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York and Washington were hiding and training there. At the time, Afghanistan was controlled by the Taliban, an extremist Islamic group who tried to control lots of aspects of people's lives, from banning the flying of kites to stopping girls from going to school. The US and its allies, including Australia, fought to remove the Taliban from power. A new Afghan government was put in place, but years on, the Taliban never completely went away. Eventually, the US agreed to withdraw the last of its troops and leave power to the new Afghan government. But as they left the country last week, the Taliban quickly gained more power and control.
The challenge of the peace and freedom of the people of Afghanistan, sadly, remain an unresolved issue.
World leaders are asking for those who wish to leave to be allowed out of the country, and the world is watching on to see what happens to Afghanistan and the 38 million people who live there.
Tennis star Naomi Osaka says she's going to donate the winnings of her next tournament to help the country of Haiti. The island was hit by a powerful 7.2 magnitude earthquake on Saturday. Around 1,300 people have died and thousands more have been injured. Rescuers are still looking for survivors, and neighbouring countries say they're sending help. It's National Science Week, so we're about to meet one of the youngest people in Australia to author a scientific paper. Rohan here lives in Perth and made a really cool discovery while out snorkeling with his dad.
Yes, Rohan here loves to snorkel.
The ocean is like a whole different world itself.
And it was on an underwater adventure he noticed something interesting about octopuses.
When I looked really close, I could notice that there was a fish next to it. I thought it could be by coincidence, but it wasn't. It was actually following it. I told my dad, and he didn't believe me at first.
But as a researcher of animal behaviour himself, Rohan's dad challenged him to record his observations. So that's what he did for the next year, at 4 different beaches in Perth.
Then we saw it a couple more times, and then he started to believe me.
Yeah, Dad. Turns out the brown-spotted wrasfish follows the WA common octopus because when it uses its tentacles to forage for food, that disturbs food the fish can then eat. It's something called nuclear follower behaviour. And while it's been seen with other animals, thanks to Rohan, it's the first time this budding friendship has been noticed.
We wrote a scientific article about the behavioral adaptations.
The discovery has now been published in a CSIRO journal, making Rohan one of the youngest people in Australia to have his research published. Amazing! So does he want to be a scientist when he's older?
Of course I do. Science is kind of my thing.
Let's head to the UK now, where a kid's decided to walk more than 300 kilometres across the country. Why? Let's find out. Roll the tape. 11-year-old Jude is going for a walk. A really long walk. All the way from Hebden Bridge in the north of England to London. But why?
I'm doing this because I want the UK government to introduce a carbon tax. So a carbon tax would make the companies that burn fossil fuels, they would have to pay for the amount of tonnes of CO2 for them, and that would make it profitable for them to switch to a renewable option.
Along the way, he's trying to collect 100,000 signatures for his petition, calling for the carbon tax. But what do you make of all this, Mum?
I just think it's great, and he's standing up for something that he believes in. He's worked really hard, and I just feel really proud of him.
remember that every step you take gets you one step closer to your goal, and that's really, really helped me keep on going.
Well, that's all the news we've got for you today, but in the meantime, don't forget you can always hit subscribe, and you can also walk 300 kilometres, but you could hit subscribe, that's easier.